allow me to pass my condolences to the people of Uganda and the government of Uganda. It was very sad to hear what happened, the terrorist attack.
We were very sad to note that in our neighboring countries, in one of our partner states, in Uganda, there was an attack by terrorists.
Abaka bagamba nti okulwanyisa obutujju tekusobola kulinyibwa ku nfeete okujjako nga amawanga ga East Africa gakwatidde wamu.
I don't think this parliament should rest until we see what we experience in Uganda being tackled very quickly, but also all the partner states contributing to arresting the situation. That is the anti-terrorism thing. We should not rest until we see those mechanisms that I claim is in place. And we have African Union. What are we doing at African Union so that we kick out this devil of repetitive crisis in our continent? What are we doing so that we secure Ethiopia, which is burning now? If you don't watch out, the whole region may undergo the same threat.
Let us have a homegrown force, basically of these 6 partner states, and then with the one command, with the coordinated center of intelligence, and name it, so that they are able to address these issues of war, insecurity, and so on and so forth.
Omubaka wa Uganda, Jojo Don, agamba nti enjawukana eziri wakati w'amawanga Uganda ne Rwanda, Burundi ne Rwanda zirina okugonjoolwa mu bwangu okutangira omulabe ayinza okukozesa enjawukana zino.
In the direction of normalizing our relations between Uganda and Rwanda, between Rwanda and Burundi. Because we can't sit here and play the ostrich and imagine that the situation is as normal as it is. It is not normal and it is wrong. We are complicit to it by our silence.
Abaka mu palamenti eno baagala amawanga gongere ssente mu byokwerinda okusobola okwaŋŋanga ebikolwa by'obutujju n'obubinja obwagala okutabangula emirembe mu mawanga gano.
Whereas the committee appreciates funding from development partners towards peace and security program, the committee is concerned that over-dependence on donor funds is unpredictable and not sustainable in case of donor withdrawal.
Jingo Francis, NTV, wano mu Arusha, Tanzania.
The Indian delegation's argument at COP26 to balance mitigation of climate change effect against other development needs like poverty eradication aptly captures the predicament many African countries face. Pledges of financial resources like the $100 billion made in 2009 are yet to be fulfilled, which means African nations must be ready to finance and manage their own survival against the climate change doomsday. Let's explore one of the ways this can be done.
Glasgow Climate Pact, which is the final agreement from COP26, has been praised for being the first ever climate deal to directly address the issue of coal, the worst fossil fuel or cause of greenhouse gases. The deal also pledged more money to help developing countries adapt to the devastating impact of climate change. Having failed to mobilize $100 billion pledged by developed nations in 2009, COP26 has made an even more ambitious commitment. That's to raise $500 billion by 2025. The money is intended to help emerging economies, including those in Africa, transition to clean energy. As scientists predict an increase in weather vagaries and natural calamities like severe flooding due to climate change, poorer nations insist that the richer nations who are responsible for more carbon emissions should finance adaptation to the effect of climate change. African countries have, however, been urged to urgently find their own adaptation means, considering that pledges like $100 billion from 2009 are yet to be fulfilled. With the goal of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's a race against time for planet Earth to avoid the most extreme effects of climate change.
We speak to Ibrahim Sheikh Diang, Director General of African Risk Capacity Group of the African Union. He's also UN Assistant Secretary General. Welcome to the show. Considering how slow African development partners have been in delivering on their commitment in the fight against climate change effect, what self-sustaining options are available for African countries?
Well, first of all, considering the fact that Africa does not contribute to the global warming as the rest of the developed world, there's still responsibility of developed countries to provide the funding they promised in the Paris Accord. That promise was not kept by 2020, which is $100 billion annually. And in Glasgow, there's some renewed commitment that has been made to actually provide additional funding by 2025. So hopefully that commitment will be met. In the meantime, the Africans themselves have to take responsibility in dealing with the impact of climate change, particularly on vulnerable communities, so that we actually protect the life and livelihood of many Africans across the board. And that's why an organization like mine is a testimony of the African leadership by creating an organization entirely dedicated in dealing with the effect of climate change so we can respond appropriately.
Now, how can African countries implement an innovative financing solution in terms of insurance against climate change or against health emergencies?
Well, first of all, let's recognize that at the COP26, and this is a major breakthrough for Africans, it's been recognized the importance of loss and damages. In this case, the problem that we're faced with as a continent is the impact it has on food security, communities selling their assets to survive. So something needs to be done. And we got three ways of innovating. Number one, by helping the Africans to plan properly and understanding their exposure to climate change so they can take the informed decision, either as a government or other institutions that deal with the impact of climate change. I think second, it's the planning process whereby African government themselves can develop what we call contingency planning so that when there is a disaster, they can actually respond appropriately. And I think third, that's where the insurance comes in. When the government decide to transfer the risk to the insurance market, then they have access to additional funding, which allows them, in the case of disaster, to have resources that allow them to support the life and livelihood of many Africans that are affected by climate change.
The decision taken by Glasgow, is it a welcome decision by African countries, and how can they best use it to their advantage?
Well, let's start with the positive side, and that is that there are a couple of things that are very good for Africa. The fact that loss and damage is being recognized as something important to deal with demonstrates once again that we are thinking about developing countries and Africa in particular as well. I think second, Glasgow also recognized the importance of technological transfer so that Africa can have access to climate technology so we can actually profile our risk. And that's something that's very welcoming for Africans in general. I think third, the fact that capacity building is recognized as an important part of the solution, we will help, obviously, the Africans develop their capacity in dealing with climate change as well. And last but not least, the commitment on financing will also help Africans to get additional funding so that we can actually provide resources for the adaptation fund that Africans require to invest in adaptation. These are all extremely important. Now, obviously, the point which is a bit difficult to swallow for many African countries is the fact that many African countries rely on fossil fuel to develop themselves. So therefore, having to find a balance between using these resources to develop your country and also dealing with the impact of climate change, it's a difficult balance to strike. So hopefully we can learn from other countries as Africans and make sure we can find the right balance to make sure we can develop while we deal with the impact of climate change as well.
Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh Diang, thank you so much for making out time for this interview.
Pleasure is mine.